A special edition of Back Your Blue. Second Chance Bail Bonds. Usually Daniel Madelon is here. He is the CEO of Second Chance Bail Bonds and Monitoring. He is not here with us today, but the Director of Operations at Second Chance, Jesse Fellebaum, is here. Jesse, what's up, man?
Good to be here.
You been all right?
Things been great.
It has been a day or two, and you always come in and make me feel, well, less than adequate. I mean, dude is dressed to the nines. He looks like he stepped out of a, like a modeling magazine or something like that. And here I am in a sweatshirt and hoodie and a ball cap. This guy's dressed to the nines. It's always a pleasure to have you, though, man. You know how to do it.
Borrowed it yesterday. Got to be back by noon, so let's get it going.
All right. He rented it over at Men's Warehouse. Of course. That's exactly right. Our guest today is the founder of Stop Suicide USA and board member of the SAM Foundation, which we'll get into, Chaplain Koon. Everybody calls you Lou.
They call me Lou.
How come?
I started having grandkids.
Okay.
And my middle name is Lou, so Papa Lou was what they wanted to call me, and I didn't want to confuse them.
Okay.
And you gotta look at the meaning of the name too. Ken means handsome.
Oh.
That went out the window.
Well, come on down.
But Lou means warrior.
Okay. All right.
Not that I am a warrior, but when you call me that, it reminds me of what I'm supposed to be. So that's kind of the reason behind it.
That's powerful, man. I love that.
Sure.
Isn't it funny how words, most people have no idea what you just said. I never knew that Lou meant warrior. I've never heard that a day in my life.
Yeah.
It's amazing sometimes when the smallest thing, Jesse, and you probably know this too, the smallest thing has this grand meaning that you never even considered.
I'm going to go look my name up as soon as I get out of here.
Yeah,
hoping for glory.
Do you have a book? Maybe we can, look some of these things up.
A book of names? Yeah. I need to work on that.
Because let me tell you, Tug is a nickname. Jerry's my name. Tug is a nickname. I can't imagine if you look up Tug what it means. I'm afraid to on the internet most days. But when it comes to Jerry, which is not the toughest of sounding names, maybe there's something there. Who knows?
Maybe.
You can't ever tell. You have served as a hospital, fire, law enforcement, military chaplain. You're currently the crisis intervention chaplain for Peachtree City, Georgia's police department and the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. Trainer for the first responders CIT training, and also the Georgia public safety trainer. How did you start doing this?
Wow. I fell into it because I was there. I experienced those suicidal thoughts, and my oldest son, was an airman. I had gone back into the military and had been out, went back in, and my son recognized that I was having thoughts of suicide, and he asked me the suicide question. That was 2011, and a year later we formed Armed Forces Mission. That's our legal name, and we've been doing it ever since for the purpose of training as many people as we can. So we've trained about 30,000 people now, and about 25% of those are law enforcement.
That is not an insignificant number. Jesse, 30,000?
That's insane.
No, it really is remarkable. That's a huge number. And I don't mean to diminish anything any other nonprofit or charity's doing. I'm not trying to do that, but those numbers usually don't come through the door. When we talk about it's 500, maybe on a good day, whatever the nonprofit's doing, they've done 1,000 of it. And then you see it and hear it from you, and you're saying we've trained 30,000 people, and a quarter of them being police officers. And we know that in America we are at a point where we're having major issue with mental health. I think for a long time mental health was not considered an actual thing. It was just like, oh, that person's crazy. You know what I mean? It was just that.
Right.
And they didn't realize, or we didn't recognize that so many people deal with so many things that mental health, it has to be a priority in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Well, since 2020, the thoughts of suicide have doubled across the country. We used to say 1 out of 20 people were having thoughts of suicide, and now we say 1 out of 10 people are having thoughts of suicide, and 1 out of 250 people every year are going to attempt suicide. So it's the numbers are incredible. The hospitals are imploding from all the people that are showing up with mental health crisis and suicidal ideation, and there'll be 1.5 million people in the hospital this year because they attempted suicide. So that's a lot of folks.
That's staggering.
But why, Jesse? I think that's the question we all want to know, right?
I agree. 100%.
Is why? Why, Lou? Why? Why is it happening?
Wow, that's a great question.
I know
yeah.
it's $1 million question. If you could answer it, you'd solve it today. But what is the research showing? What is your foundation and the people that you work with? What are they saying? What are they seeing? Why do they feel like it's happening?
Well, I mean, the thing is, Nobody ever wakes up and says, I think I'll kill myself today. Suicide is not a thought that we have unless something's going on in our life. And so one of the things that I always say is that nobody ever decides I'm going to kill myself unless they've had some type of loss. It's always related to a loss. So whether it's a veteran who's lost his service dog, or a police officer who's going through a divorce, or maybe was involved in a crisis situation on the job, there's always some type of loss there. Maybe back in 2009, I was actually selling real estate in my former career. In 2009, we had a lot of folks that lost their homes.
Oh my gosh, with the downturn in the economy.
And so finances. So the suicides went up by over 10,000 in 1 year. In 2010, a year later, when the economy is just crashed and people's mental health is crashing. And so there's always some type of loss associated with the thoughts of suicide.
It makes sense to me. It's so apparent. And sometimes, Jesse, I don't know about you, but sometimes it seems so obvious, and we oftentimes overlook the obvious, searching for the profound.
I'll tell you this, I've spoken with you guys ahead of it, and I'll just share it now. In 2011, my dad took his life. He was in the construction industry, and that ceased to exist in that 2009, 10, 11
there
era.
You go, yeah.
Struggled to find work, moved all over, had a health event with his knee, no insurance, and loss of hope. And, one day I got the call from my mom. And so this means a great deal to me that you're here.
Wow.
But yeah, hit it, the entire time. Looking back, I think that I see things now, even the phone call right before he did it to me to say goodbye.
Wow.
But I didn't take it as that, looking back, I do. Right. So definitely near and dear to my heart, and the work you do is honorable.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I think you probably, in your situation, but in a marriage that's fallen apart, there's the clues, the road map that got you from where you were to where you are now, and it takes lots of twists and turns. But then you look back at it and you go, "Oh, that's what I missed. That's what I didn't see."
Had that moment.
How do you? Because it's been, what you said, 2011.
Yeah, about 14 years.
Yeah. When you look at it now. Do you look at it through different lenses? I don't expect that the pain changes by any means or stretch of the imagination. But how do you look at it now versus what you did then?
That's a great question.
And it doesn't have to be profound. And if there's not an answer, there's not an answer. It's just real life.
There was some anger, questions about how did I not see this? It's so obvious after the event took place that he was struggling and didn't speak with anybody about it. He certainly, and I think you deal with this a lot, it's almost like there's no way, like he was a man's man,
a guy's guy.
That's a weak thing. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to cry for help. But the signs were there.
Yeah.
So, first it was anger, then it was, you accept it.
Acceptance.
Then it's, trying to get my mom into a good spot. Now it's tough because I can begin to appreciate it as a father of a 13-year-old. I didn't appreciate him when I was 13. I thought he was, didn't want me to have any fun and all these things. Boy, did he have the best intentions for me.
Right. Most parents do, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. And he was great dad. And now it's just kind of sad that my daughter doesn't get to know him.
Get to experience that.
Outside of the stories and the things we share with her. But
yeah,
that's right.
That's amazing. Right. Where were you at that point? Because you said this is the reason you started this whole thing is... What got you there?
Well, I was in real estate. That was one of the things.
And then the market.
Had a pretty nice sized company. I had 30 agents, and and the economy imploded, and we had to sell the farm, and they were planning to retire too, and quit paying my medical insurance because I couldn't afford it. And then my third son was involved in a fire, and got burned over 90% of his arms and half of his face, and the medical bills bankrupted me, and I got to the point where I felt like it was a sacrifice and not a suicide. I can sacrifice my life. I got $1 million life insurance policy. My wife's got 4 kids. They're my kids too. She'll have Social Security for the rest of her life, and she'll be better off with me dead. And that was my thought process. And so one of the things we often say in our class is suicide makes sense. It makes sense, and that sounds crazy. But
it doesn't when you lay it out like that.
Right.
Lou, my dad wrote it in his letter and left out the policies.
Yeah.
Wow.
There you go. And so and I would say one thing to you. Your dad was actually a very courageous man. You said, sometimes we feel like we're weak.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I often share is suicide is not. We have this idea that only cowards kill themselves. Well, here's the bottom line, guys. Cowards can't kill themselves. It's not in their DNA. Suicide is actually a very courageous act. The problem is it's just not the most courageous act.
Right. Battling through is, right?
That's right.
Oh, it's amazing.
So, one of the things I would say to anybody that's out there listening to us today, be truly courageous. I know you're courageous. You're having these thoughts. But the truly courageous thing would be to ask for help, to get the help that you need.
Amen.
That's the courageous thing to do.
As we wrap up this first segment, I have so many questions, and we'll get to them. And of both of you, I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
I want to talk to you, Lou, about more than 2,000 successful suicide interventions in both the military and civilian communities. You've been with the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health Strategic Committee between for several years now, right? Is that
we trained communities. I was working with them to train communities and an outreach for them. So,
so you came up with the a draft and helped draft the 20 to 2025 state suicide prevention plan. Consultant now for the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the sacrifice. We'll talk about a lot of things. It's a different show for us. There's usually some laughs, and I hope we'll be able to get to that point too in this episode. But some serious topics, that needed to be discussed and explored, because I think we'll all be better off for it. We'll continue next on Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. Welcome back to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug Coward, along with Jesse Philibom. He is the Director of Operations at A Second Chance Bail Bonds. He is in for Daniel Madelon today. Delighted to have him because he has incredible experience and insight into our guest today, and that is Lou Koon. That's what his grandkids call him. His name is Ken, but goes by Lou. It's kind of like me. My name's Jerry, but I go by Tug. It's because everybody calls me Tug. It's just the way it works out, man. Nicknames often stick. And I just wish I had a great story, like you had a great story of why you're called that. Tug is just a silly nickname my wife came up with. It means nothing. It has no meaning whatsoever. Lou means warrior. Tug means nothing.
Oh, wow.
So now I wish my nickname had a cool meaning. I'm going to make up a story one day. Jesse may need to.
She may have that story.
Yeah, maybe she's not told me.
That's right.
She's afraid to embarrass me. Maybe that could be the case. And we're talking about Lou's foundation. He is the founder of Stop Suicide USA. I keep saying USAA. Pick up. He is the founder of Stop Suicide USA and a board member of the SAM Foundation. We'll get to some of that in just a little bit. But you've conducted more than 2,000 successful suicide interventions, both military and civilian communities. That's a pretty extraordinary number. How do you get involved? Is it through the foundation? People reach out to you? People call you directly? How do you help those 2,000 people that you have?
Wow. So when I was in the military, as a chaplain, people come to you when they're struggling with stuff, and they confide things to the chaplain, who has total confidentiality that they wouldn't say to their sergeant or their commander. And so that's a burden that a chaplain has to carry sometimes, because he doesn't disclose to anybody else what's going on in the soldier's life. And then with police officers, that's the case. And then I have faith community, they call me. The reality is pastors have not had any training in suicide intervention, and so they call me. I have big churches calling me because they don't know what to do with a church member. The same is true with police departments as well, because the reality is only about 5% of police officers and first responders have been trained in suicide intervention. And we think they're the ones that are supposed to know what to do when we show up. Interestingly, back January a year ago, the SAM Foundation sponsored a training for one of our local police departments just north of here, and we trained 150 firefighters and police officers, and again, only 5% had any training in suicide intervention. That's kind of scary, because we expect them to know what to do, but then who do they call when they're in trouble?
When it's them.
Yeah. And so who does 911 call? We've trained a lot of 911 operators, and they've had very little training in suicide intervention. And so thankfully we're starting to recognize that, and CIT is becoming a bigger thing, and more officers are getting involved in that. But
can you explain what CIT is?
Yeah, that's crisis intervention teams.
Okay.
And so originally we began it with the idea, who wants to be a CIT officer? And now we're pretty much mandating that everybody's got to take it. But again, it's only about 1 hour out of the 40 that's directed towards suicide. The rest of it is other mental health situations and things of that nature. But 1 hour will help.
Yes, better than no hours.
Oh, yes. One of the things I say, there's a lot of crisis in life that we don't need training for, that we intuitively know what to do. I mean, if you get a fraudulent credit card charge, you intuitively know to call the credit card company. Or if you see blue lights in your rearview mirror, you know to move over or pull over because you're about to get a ticket. But with suicide, we don't intuitively know what to do. And so we don't ask. 95% of the people will never ask. They may see signs that something's wrong, but they don't intuitively know to ask, are you having thoughts of suicide? And that's what we teach in our class. That's the main point. If you don't do anything else, can you learn how to ask, are you having thoughts of suicide?
Goodness. Yeah. It's so important, and I know Jesse, that these are conversations that need to be had. At a second chance, do y'all deal with this? I mean, I would assume you have to deal with it on occasion in the line of work that you're in. And if you do, then what's the protocol? What do y'all do?
So we do, and I absolutely have stories of people that have gone to jail, gotten out, and taken their lives.
They just feel like that they're at the worst place imaginable. There's no recovery, bouncing back.
I think it goes back to what Lou said earlier. It's tied to an event or a loss.
Yeah.
And
going to jail. I mean, that's an event.
There's 300% higher risk of suicide for incarcerated people.
There you go.
Makes perfect sense.
I'll tell you what is pretty evident to me in just this short time of filming is that we need to do something with the team at Second Chance.
Right.
We need that education because, it goes without saying that it's a very dark moment for every single person that comes through our doors. It's dark not only for, of course, the accused, but also the family member who, raised this young boy to be a man, and now the perfect image of this child has come crashing down because they're accused of a heinous crime.
Right.
So the parent, or the loved one is also struggling with thoughts. So we need to...
And feeling responsible.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, that's what I mean.
I can totally see that. I mean, I've never thought about it. To be honest, it's never crossed my mind ever one time. So, but when you say it out loud, you're like, oh yeah. How can you not? I mean, this is the child that you brought in to being, and that that you've raised probably to the best of your ability. And I hope this is not offensive. You feel like you failed.
Right.
Oh, right. I hear that exact term used. Yeah. I've failed. I failed them.
Yeah.
All of it.
As if there's a training for parents. If there's a manual to raise children.
That's right.
I remember the doctor before we went home with my son. He was born up in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, and I was living in Dalton, Georgia, where I'm from at the time. And that's the one thing the doctor said in jest to me. And he was like, "Hey man, just so you know, ain't no manual." And we were cutting up, going back and forth, and I'm having trouble getting the car seat in the car. And the nurses came out, and they were so sweet. They came out and had gone through training with the fire department, and they helped me get the car seat situated and bolted down or connected the way it needed to be. Secured is the word I was looking for. Secured and that became what prompted the doctor to tell me that, because I was like, I feel like an idiot already. I can't even get the car seat right. And he was like, hey man, there ain't no manual, so take all the help you can get. And
absolutely.
That's almost the same conversation we're having. No. Take the help that you need.
I remember, I've written 3 books. I remember the first book that I thought about writing was going to be on parenting. But my kid, I had 4 boys, and I'm thinking, the first 10 years, this is a cakewalk. This is so easy. I can write a book on this. Yeah. Thank God I didn't write that book. Because when they turned 15, it is a totally different story.
You would have needed an amendment.
I would have redacted.
That's a great way to put it.
A retraction.
A retraction.
That's right. That's amazing, though. It really is remarkable to be to the point where you think you've got it, and then there's so many people that don't have it.
Right.
And that's all of us. Is not just, I mean, and it goes to so many things in life that you feel like you got a good grip on. And then your world comes crashing. Maybe it's a job.
Right.
You know, you talk about loss, and maybe it's the job that you felt like you've done so well, and you've worked so hard and been so committed, and yet budget cuts, and it's nothing of your own doing. It's just, look, we got to cut the budget, and you're the name.
Right.
You know, you're the name on the list, and it has nothing
retirement.
or retirement, and then losing that
Identity.
and
I went through that. I'm 62 now, and I took the uniform off 3 years ago, and I thought, who am I now? Because that's big. With police officers, firefighters, first responders, that's a huge thing. I mean, the reality is the average lifespan after retirement for a police officer is only about 4 to 5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Never heard that stat before. And we've been doing this show well over a year, right?
Yep.
I've never heard that stat before.
Yep.
That's an unbelievable stat.
Well, I'm a chaplain. The good book says without purpose, people
Amen.
perish.
Well, but that's where I was going. When you said identity, I was looking for identity and purpose. And that's the other thing. People need purpose. As humans, we need purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And whatever that purpose is, I mean, obviously, finding a good purpose, helping others, being Christ-like, doing the things that the good book says we should do. Sometimes finding that purpose is more difficult than you might think.
Oh, it's important. I mean, we perish without it.
No, that's right.
Yeah, I will tell you this. I had an officer a few years ago that was suicidal, and I asked him, when did you really feel like you were the happiest? He said, when I was coaching Little League. Wow.
Purpose.
Wow. Well, you're not coaching anymore. No, my kids grew up. Well, what are they doing? Well, one's playing minor league ball. Well, I'm in a baseball station right now.
Yeah, right across the street from Truist Park.
And one's playing at Georgia Tech, and one's a coach now. Well,
seems like you got a pretty good knack at this coaching thing.
You were a great coach. You should be coaching again. I mean, there's kids out there that need you.
And that need someone.
Yeah.
And it's funny you bring that up, because when I was young, and I did not turn out to be a very good ball player. I loved it, but I wasn't good. My daddy had never played ball in his whole life. He was asked to drop out of school, and he was in 8th grade to work for the family. They were dirt floor poor.
Right.
And he wanted me to have a different experience. At East Side Athletic Association up in Dalton, Georgia, where I'm from, they didn't have anybody to coach. And my dad was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no clue about what I'm doing, but I'm willing to go out there.
Absolutely.
Do you know how much? I didn't know that my dad didn't know anything about coaching. I thought he knew everything.
Right.
He taught me how to catch. I thought he knew it all.
That's
Isn't it amazing, though, how a coach like that is not using that gift that they have just because they don't think they're needed.
Right.
And the one thing they are is completely needed. There are children all over Metro Atlanta that could use that man.
Yeah. And it is a calling, I think.
It certainly is.
I mean, I still call my coach from high school. And I see him, he's still coach because of the impact he had on my life. So, yeah.
Do you have that, Jesse, those people in your life? Maybe it's not a coach, maybe it's a teacher, but that same role model, that same mentor, that same person that you can go back to, and no matter what, you pick up where you left off.
I feel that way about so many people.
Yeah.
But
you don't have to narrow it to one. There's in life we have so many, right?
Yeah.
So many people that have positively influenced you.
That's right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have a lot of stories like that where, they shaped who I became.
That's funny because I saw the almost frustration on your face. You're like, I can't narrow it to one person.
Yeah.
I saw the wheels turning, and that makes a lot of sense. And I would imagine, Lou, you got the same thing with coaches, teachers.
I will tell you
pastors.
right now, Nancy Waite was my teacher in elementary school.
Janet Tripp for me.
Yeah. Well, here's the neat thing about Nancy. She moved out to Wyoming several years ago, and she started following me on Facebook, and we reconnected, and she found out what I did. And so she said, you've got to come to Wyoming. So we have actually got our feet on the ground right now trying to figure out how to get out there and raise the support to get out there.
That's great.
Because Wyoming is the #1 worst state in the country for suicide.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't want to derail where you're going with that, but how is that the case? Why is that the case?
Well, I mean, there's only 500,000 people that live in the state, and most of the state is owned by the government. I mean, you got Yellowstone and all that stuff. So there's very few resources.
Air Force bases out there too.
Yeah, there's very few resources, and then you do have a large indigenous Indian population that struggles with suicide and alcohol
And drugs.
And all that. And so the folks are few and far between. So rural areas typically have a higher suicide rate. The other thing that's true is that the higher the altitude, the higher the suicide rate.
Oh, how does that connect?
You know, some people say, "Was it the air? Is it hard to breathe?" No, I'd rather breathe air in North Georgia than air in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
But again, it's because of there's a huge drug problem, meth problem. There's greater access to lethal means, and the resources are scarce. So somebody that lives in Towns County, Georgia, typically has got to drive down to Gainesville or, to get the resources they need. And so, yeah, it's tough. And then the economics plays into it as well.
Do you see this in the bail bonding industry too? Is it the people in rural areas? Because, I mean, if you watch the news tonight, it's all urban crime. Do you see that where y'all are, that rural communities struggle like that?
No.
Not as much? Okay.
Not as much.
That's interesting.
With the statistics that we track, I don't see that. I'm sure that if I were to drill down on it, there may be some correlation there as well. It would make sense.
If you take the 20th congressional district, which is all of North Georgia, or excuse me, the 9th congressional district, which is 20 counties in North Georgia. We've got several districts here in Atlanta and it's based on 750,000 people. So it takes 20 counties in North Georgia to have a district. So the 9th congressional district is eat up. If we could change the paradigm on the 9th congressional district, it would change the stats for the whole state of Georgia. We wouldn't be. Georgia is not the worst. It's not, it's not like Wyoming, and it's not the best. Y'all want to take a guess on what state has the lowest suicide rate?
Gosh. I'm going to go with the exact opposite of what I think, California.
California's about average.
Okay.
Yeah. Melinda, I heard her whisper Hawaii. That's about average.
Yeah.
New York and New Jersey.
I was going to guess New York.
Almost.
Because I went the opposite.
Yeah.
But they've spent more money trying to train people. And if we train people, it's what I was saying earlier, nobody has to call get training in how to call the credit card company when you have a fraudulent.
You just know who to get a hold of.
You know what to do. But intuitively, and so they've done a lot more training. They actually kind of spearheaded the CIT movement, and they're doing a lot with that. So and they've got resources. So yeah.
So you talk about military and police officers, and this is something that we've discussed on the show a whole bunch, is that they're the people that you call when things are going south, when you have that crisis moment. And then, in turn, they don't have, because they're the people, and they feel like, I can't have this breakdown. I can't have this weakness. I'm here for everybody. And truly, they need to have that moment. They need to have that person like you, Lou, that they can call. I feel like that I've learned through this show that that's what happens more. And I can see it with people in the military, too, because I served in the Navy. The guys that would never let the barrier down. They would never let the wall down. They never let themselves grieve. They never let themselves heal. And they have the same exact issues. I feel like I'm beating down the right path on this. They don't speak up because they are the person that gets called.
They have to be the strong one.
They have to be the strong one.
Yeah.
Better put.
Yeah, and I have a method that I use now. I've got 5 people that I can call. And
you personally?
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
And I put out a Batman symbol on Facebook a lot of times, and one of them will call me. The old signal up in the sky.
Like the 60s.
Now everybody's going to call me.
Yeah,
so,
right.
But those 5 people know. And I don't do that often, but I just need 5 minutes to debrief. I recall the most recent, we had a 16-year-old girl that took her life. I showed up. Everybody's in shock. The police officer was even struggling with it. And I have to be the strong person. But then you leave, and I pulled into Home Depot, and I put out the Batman signal. And so a friend of mine, Nancy, called me. She was actually a firefighter in New York during 9/11. So she knows trauma.
Yeah.
And she called me. She said, "What's up?" And I said, "I'm numb." I don't have any emotion. I just left a suicide scene. A 16-year-old girl killed herself, and I don't have any emotion about it. And I know I got to go home to my wife, and I need to be able to have emotions and feelings again. And that's one of the reasons there's such a high divorce rate in first responder community, because we shut down to do our job, but then we don't turn back on to go home. And that's a huge problem. So
that, and knowing yourself.
Right.
Like, you were able to recognize, and I'm sure it's through years of experience and training, you were able to recognize that in yourself. Knowing yourself is a valuable tool, and I think you get to know yourself better, obviously, as you get older in life. Younger folks struggle. They're still trying to figure out who they are.
Oh, yeah.
And then not being able to recognize it the way that you did. I mean, you pulled over knowing what needed to be done. Most people don't have that.
Right. Well, it's neat. I was in Dallas all last week training law enforcement for a whole week, and the third day I had an officer that stuck around after class, and he comes up to me and says, "What do you do to make sure you stay safe?" And I said, "That's a good question. Very few people ask me that." But I have dug deep trenches, because we're in a battle. And, the old school, we used to fight with trenches. We'd dig trenches. World War II, you remember the trenches? There was stories of that. So I have dug deep trenches in those trenches. I jump into the trench when I need help.
Because that's where your battle buddies are.
Yeah.
That's where the rest of
And it
is
a battle. I tell people all the time, my first thought of suicide was in 2011, and in 9 and 10 and 11, that was where I was struggling. And can I tell you that I've never had that thought again? No, I can't.
I didn't know how to ask you that question, and I was about to write it down to ask you that exact question.
Yeah.
Does it ever come back? And I was afraid to ask you that question.
No, it can come back. But one of the things that we teach is that suicide is a thought. I don't have to act on it. It's like any thought. I mean, you guys look like nice guys, but let me ask you, have you ever acted on every thought that you've had?
No, because I would eat pizza every day for lunch, dinner, breakfast. I'd eat pizza all the time.
We'd weigh 400 pounds. We'd all be in jail, I mean, even Billy Graham's wife, she said, "I never thought of divorce, but I have thought of murder."
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So
that's what I'm saying, man. You don't act on it, and it's a great way to put it, that you don't act on all your thoughts.
So that's actually one of our core principles. Suicide is a thought. I don't have to act on it, but I am having that thought, so let's talk about it.
Isn't it interesting, though? It's always the simple stuff. It's always the small stuff in life that make the most sense and actually matter the most. You know what I mean? It's always the small things. It's never the big things. Like if I go home, and my wife and I are snippy with each other, then that starts to snowball, and it's small and it's small and it's small, and then later on, if it happens over a few days, and then it creates something big.
Right.
It's always the small things, including with gratitude, being grateful, just saying thank you, saying please, being appreciative when someone's done something for you or helped you in some way. It's always the small things. That's why I think it's so important that it's the small thing again. You don't act on that thought.
Right. Another core value that we teach is not what you look at that matters, is what you see. And I have there's an organization up in South Carolina that puts a lot of my sayings on T-shirts. I did not coin that phrase. That was Henry David Thoreau said.
Yeah, he's got a good track record. That guy.
Yeah.
I feel like he's written some things that matter.
I actually Googled that phrase to see if I was the first one that said it, and I found out he was the first one that said it. He wrote it in a book called Walden. He was sitting on a pond of Edgar Allan Poe back in the day, and he wrote a book.
This one.
Yeah, that's a good one there.
Yeah. It's not what you look at that matters, is what you see.
I mean, that's almost as good as Rocky 1.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But I'm partial to 4, but
Okay, fair enough.
That kind of goes back though to what we were talking about earlier. We say I didn't see this coming. Yeah. Well, it's not what you look at, it's what you see. And so the way I explain that to law enforcement and to everybody that comes to our classes, imagine that you've had a hurricane come through and the stop signs at a four-way stop have been blown away. Does that mean you don't have to stop?
No.
No, the circumstances dictate that I need to stop.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of training out there is focused on signs, but sometimes there are no signs. But you have to be aware of the circumstances. What's the ingredients in their life right now? And if the ingredients are on the table of their life, they can make a mess with just one ingredient. It goes back to that snowball effect.
Sure.
It only takes one ingredient to make a mess. But typically, there's more than one. It's an escalation of things, and it's not just the divorce. It's the fact that the finances were messed up, and that was leading to the divorce, and now the kids are going to be going separate ways. And so one thing always leads to another, and it's a snowball effect, as you mentioned.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
We'll continue this conversation with Lou Koon. He is the founder of Stop Suicide USA and a board member of the SAM Foundation, along with Jesse Felabon, too. He's the director of ops, and for Daniel Madelon there at a Second Chance Bail Bonds. This is Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug. Welcome back to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug Coward, along with Director of Operations at a Second Chance Bail Bonds, and for Daniel Madelon today, Jesse Felabon, and our guest is Lou Koon. He is the founder of Stop Suicide USA and a board member of the SAM Foundation. During the break, you brought up something that I think is so relatable to moms and dads and parents and grandparents, and probably Lou. Tell everybody listening what you're talking about.
Yeah, so we were chatting about how social media plays a part in, maybe these increased rates of suicide, particularly amongst the youth, or in general. And not only because people see all the things that these folks purport to have, the private jets and the Range Rovers and the stacks of money, but also social media makes it way easier for bullies to bully their victims.
Right.
They no longer have to walk up to somebody to their face and insult them and poke their chest. They get to do it behind a keyboard in a basement somewhere. So can you talk about that a little bit, and also maybe some things to look out for as a parent of a 13-year-old daughter, and help parents a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. Social media is not real. That's, you mentioned, it's not real, but if we base our self-esteem on that which is not real, that's a little bit of a problem. There's a reason that the social media giants don't want their kids on their platforms. And there was a documentary that came out a few years ago about that, and these vice presidents of social media organizations are saying, no, my kids aren't on social media. And there's a reason for that. There was actually a case a couple of years ago where a young girl had taken her long raven hair all the way down to her hip, and she bobbed it, and her dad actually chastised her on social media for it, and she killed herself. There was an app several years ago, I think it was called Blue Whale, and in Dalton, you're from Dalton, right? There were two teenagers that had gotten together through this app. They found each other, and they had made a pact to kill themselves. And come to find out, the girl was trying to back out, and so it ended up being a homicide-suicide. He killed her, and then he killed himself. And that was an app that young people were using. So it is scary.
It totally is. And it can be the simplest of things that trigger, like a haircut, like I remember this is, being a little vulnerable too. My son, who's a college athlete, he's fine, he's great, he's done well. I remember in high school, there was one person that poked fun of him, something he had done in a play, in a game, and it was just, it kind of blew up. Not anything major, not viral by any means, but just a couple people and it bothered him. And this kid is well-adjusted, made great grades, was, good enough to go play college ball that he's doing now. So he didn't have that need to have other people's approval. But when it went the other way, for a confident kid, can you imagine what it does to a kid that's not confident?
Right.
That doesn't have, everything. Not that Jacob's got everything to going for. He doesn't, but he's in a good position. So I can imagine if things are struggling at home or wherever, that multiplies it, magnifies it.
Well, with teenagers, if you go back to 2020, and we all know what was happening in 2020.
Yes.
But it was a worldwide chaos, right? A crisis. And so the actual suicides among adults went down a little bit in 2020. But for teenagers, it didn't. It went up. It's called the honeymoon effect. So anytime there's a tragedy, whether it's Katrina or Hurricane Harvey or 9/11 or the bombing of London in World War II for 57 days, the suicide rate in all those situations went down for about a year. So did homicide, burglary, divorce, public drunkenness. All those bad things went down for about a year. It's called the honeymoon. The community comes comes together during a difficult time. But eventually, as we all know, the honeymoon's over. And so when is that? And so imagine just hypothetically for a moment on 9/11, there was a man sitting in the second tower of the World Trade Center, and he just got his pink slip. So he's going to kill himself at work. But he looks out the window and he sees a plane flying at an extraordinarily low altitude. And he's going to watch it run into that tower. He's not going to kill himself in that moment. Out of sheer morbid curiosity, he's going to stay alive. And then he's going to have purpose. My purpose is to stay alive.
Yeah.
And so he'll live off of sounds weird, but he'll live off of the euphoria of that event for a year. And then the PTSD sets in.
And then it kicks in.
And then everything else he was already dealing with kicks in, and he kills himself a year from now. So if you look at the 100 counties around the epicenter of 9/11 in New York, the suicide rate went way down for over a year. It's the honeymoon. But eventually the honeymoon's over. But for teenagers, your 13-year-old daughter, they don't know anything about honeymoons. And when you've got teenagers who might have been, the signs might have been there that they were being abused at home, but they're no longer going to school. So DFACS calls actually kind of went down a little bit. Oh, kids are doing great. No, the kids are in more trouble than they were, because now they're not just being abused once a week. Now they're being abused 5 times a week. And nobody knows it. And so the suicide rate for teenagers in 2020 across the country went through the roof.
It's amazing. I feel like we could talk for the rest of the day. We could do 8 episodes of this show, because your story is so fascinating. And I don't mean fascinating in a good way necessarily. I just mean fascinating. The conversation's fascinating because there's so much to it, so many layers. And I just wanted to say about social media too. There are places in Atlanta that rent setups so you can go and take social media pictures and look like you're doing better than you are. There are places in Atlanta that there's people that they've built sets to look like the inside of a private jet, because you brought that up.
Yeah.
Why does everybody else have a private? I don't have a private jet. Most of them are not even real. It's there. It's a set to go take the picture to look like you've done something on social media. So, like I said, this conversation could go on for a really long time. How do folks find out more about Stop Suicide USA and then the SAM Foundation, which didn't get a whole lot into? But
you can go to the SAM Foundation. Julie Smith is a dear friend. She founded that organization back in 2017. Her brother had taken his life in 2002. And so she founded the organization to create some educational opportunities, and I've worked closely with her on that. So you can go to the samfoundation.org for that. And then our organization is stopsuicideusa.org, and we do training all over the country. I just got back from Dallas Thursday and was up in South Carolina Saturday. So we are all over. And to any law enforcement personnel out there that might be listening, call us. We would love to come to your station. We're actually doing a training that will help. I've already been completed by the time this airs, but we're looking to do more regional events. We did one the beginning of last year up in Helen and had about 10 counties that represented from that, and they came from all over to get the training. And we offer CE post-credit for law enforcement. We offer CEUs for counselors as well. And nowadays we offer them for attorneys because attorneys, they see people when they're in the worst point in their life. So we now offer CEUs for attorneys as well. And then we want anybody and everybody to come, because it's going to take all of us working together to build that beacon of hope.
Lou, we appreciate it, man. Thank you for what you do. And Jesse, thanks for being here to help guide the show. It's a great discussion that we've had today, and we appreciate you taking part in it. Hope you got something out of it as much as we did here on Back Your Blue.